Paris, 1908. Artists are submitting paintings for an important exhibition. One of the judges is Henri Matisse, a well-respected painter who is now one of the most famous artists ever. Here comes a young man with 6 paintings he hopes will impress the committee. His name is Georges Braque, and he is 26 years old. He collects posters. He peels them off the walls of Paris at night. He's an artist, and he's really good at sports. When Matisse sees Braque's paintings, he thinks they are absurd. They're made of little cubes, he says. An art critic overhears him and names this new art Cubism. Cubism was invented by 2 great friends, Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso. These 2 friends were the same age, but they were quite different. Braque worked slowly and was a little mysterious. Picasso worked quickly and was very sociable. Do you know who their heroes were? The Wright brothers, who had recently invented the flying machine. They even put references to flying in their paintings. Braque and Picasso wanted to be inventors too. They wanted to create a new art that would astound people. They were inspired by art from around the world: African sculptures, Japanese prints, and cave paintings. They noticed that when we look at something, we can only see it from one point of view. So instead of trying to paint things as they saw them, they wanted to paint things as they imagined instead. And that's what these artists did. They imagined objects seen from many sides and then flattened all this down into a single picture. This meant that they could reveal different sides of things at the same time. There are many types of cubism. The first one breaks the form into geometrical shapes and is called analytic cubism. The second one is more inventive and is based on an artist's imagination. It is called synthetic cubism. Let's look at an example of an analytic cubist painting. Braque has painted a glass on a table, but it's hard to see because the glass and the table are shown from lots of different angles. You can see the front, the back, and the sides of the glass all at the same time. It's like it's in a hall of mirrors or like having X-ray eyes. Now, here's an example of synthetic cubism, a collage by Picasso. What objects can we see? A newspaper, a bottle, a glass, a guitar. Where might we find all these things in one place? In a cafe. It's like a riddle or a puzzle. Picasso is having fun. He's giving you the clues to what the picture is about. Look at the guitar. Is it actually a guitar or pieces of a guitar? He wants your brain to put the instrument together. Lots of people have tried to decipher Cubism over the years, but Picasso and Braque refused to explain it. Other artists started making Cubist artworks too, like this sculpture by Henri Laurent and this painting by Juan Gris. Sonia and Robert Delaunay invented a colourful version of Cubism called Orphism. This painting by Sonia Delaunay illustrates a poem describing a journey across Russia on the Trans-Siberian Express. You know what it's like when you look out of a window on a speeding train? How the landscape blurs and becomes lots of different colours? This is what Delaunay is showing you in her painting. Musicians were also inspired by Cubism. And writers. People liked Cubism's optimism, how it offered a new way of looking at things and celebrated modern life. Then, in 1914, Braque and Picasso's adventures in Cubism came to an abrupt end with the outbreak of the First World War. Braque served as a soldier and was wounded on the Western Front. Meanwhile, Picasso kept working in Paris and became interested in other groundbreaking ideas, like surrealism. After the war, Picasso and Braque went their separate ways. But for 6 exciting years between 1908 and 1914, these two artists created something revolutionary. A whole new way of looking at the world.
For today's assignment, you are going to be drawing 2 small versions of your face in a Cubist style. Now from the video, there are 3 different ways you can show Cubism. The first way is analytical Cubism. That's breaking objects down into simple shapes. And you can see here in these portraits, we have simplified our facial features into lines and basic geometric shapes. The other style of Cubism that we saw in the video is synthetic Cubism. That style is more inventive and based on an artist's imagination. You're going to be incorporating synthetic Cubism into how you want to showcase your hair. For the last style of Cubism that we're going to add in, that's Orphism. Orphism is when you add colorful arrangements of elements into your design. For parts of your hair and maybe even parts of your face and the facial features, you can add in these colorful elements by utilizing the fabric samples that we have in class. Whenever you're choosing your fabric samples, you have to make sure that you're following a color scheme. We'll review the different color schemes next week, but I am going to be using what's called a monochromatic color scheme. So monochromatic means it's a color scheme of one color. So my one color is going to be blue. With any color scheme you choose, you can add in neutral colors. So neutral colors would be beiges, browns, grays, or blacks. So I could incorporate this beige with a blue fabric and still be considered, my color scheme would still be considered monochromatic. So there are 2 different ways we're going to be creating sketches today. The first way is we're going to use a dice, and we are going to roll the dice to determine which facial feature we are going to draw from the grid that you're seeing popped up here on your screen. This little grid here, or table that we're going to be following, is also located on Schoology. So for instance, I just rolled a 5. So the face shape that I'm going to draw would be the number 5 face shape. Do your best to sketch this out as cleanly as possible because this sketch is called a thumbnail sketch. So remember, a thumbnail sketch is a sketch that's about the size of your thumb. It's meant to map out what you want your final design to look like, but it's not a fully detailed drawing, but just a detailed enough drawing to give you a sense of what you want it to look like. So here it would be this shape of my head. I would roll it again and I would figure out what eye I would draw. So this is the number 1 eye. With Cubism, remember that you're not only breaking objects down into simple shapes, but one of the main things that Cubist artists did was they looked at things from many different perspectives. And so because they were looking at objects from different perspectives, things are going to be placed in very weird orientations. So normally your eyes are placed in the middle of your head, but with a Cubist style artwork, your eye could be placed at a completely different spot that's unproportional to the head itself. So it is okay to draw things in the wrong spot. That's just going to help the Cubist style show through. You have to add a second eye in. So my second eye is a number 4. So here for this one, I could draw it a little bit bigger and maybe on a completely different plane so my eyes don't match up. And whenever you guys are drawing this out, think about how this is going to translate into a cardboard structure. So this back piece of the head is going to be 1 layer of cardboard. Then the facial features that we're adding in on top, so this eye is going to be cut out of very thin, very thin chipboard cardboard that looks like this. So it's very, very thin. So we're going to be cutting that out from the chipboard and gluing it on top, as well as any other feature. So for this eye, I could cut it out so where it's a half circle or like a half oval and add these spikes on, or I could cut it out as a line. So if it's going to be a line, I'm going to have to add line variation by thickening up my line, maybe having it go from thick to thin to make it look a little bit more interesting. And then I would have these eyelashes also curve out from that. So you have to think about if you have an open end to one of your facial features, how is that going to translate into a second layer of cardboard that's going to be attached on top of this base layer? And you're going to continue rolling the dice, adding in whatever number you get for each facial feature. So for my nose, I might, draw this one over here. I'm going to play around with the scale. And once again, that's a thin line. And because this is going to be added on, I need to thicken up my line on this one. Don't forget to add in those dots. Okay, so you guys get the general gist. You would continue drawing in those features until you have a complete design. One of the things that you're going to have to consider is, do you want the corrugation to show through in your face? So what I actually ended up doing here is I drew a line through the face, and then I drew horizontal lines to showcase how I would like the corrugation to show up on the left-hand side. I chose to draw a line halfway through because if you look on the picture on the left, you'll see that in a lot of Cubist style portraits, Picasso or other Cubist style painters are actually separating the face into different color planes. The other thing that you're going to do, as you can see on the picture on the left, is find reference images of Cubist style hair that you can look up online to help you figure out what you want your hair to look like. So one of my favorite keywords whenever I'm typing in, a reference photo for Cubist hair is you could type in Cubism portrait. If you put that in on Google, you're going to see an array of examples of Cubist style portraits, which should be going through your screen right now. You can see a bunch of really cool ways to dictate how to draw your hair in an abstract fashion. So if we come over this way, notice that I'm having it look in multiple layers. I'm having things overlap. Now for this first sketch, you guys should be using the dice. This dice should dictate what you want your sketch to look like. For your second sketch, because you have to come up with two, you can choose the features, the face shape, and everything that you want to incorporate. Notice I added line variation. I'm showing corrugation. You do not have to show corrugation on yours. But what I did start doing is I started shading in the areas that I believe I would like to have fabric. You can put fabric in your hair as well as on other facial features, like maybe your lips or your eyes. I wanted to incorporate the fabric in multiple areas to create a cohesive design. So think about, once again, where you want to put fabric, making sure that the hair balances out with the rest of the face nicely. But ultimately, this should be a subtle portrait of you. So it should have some features like your hair that matches the type of hair that you have, so we can call it a self-portrait. Once you have chosen your favorite sketch, so let's say, for example, I love this sketch over here. I'm not a fan of this one. You're then going to take your 9x12 paper and you're going to finalize it and draw it to scale. Your head should fill up the majority of this paper. So if my head size was like this rounded oval, actually I should draw just a touch smaller so I can fit my hair in. So I forgot to include that. Excuse all of the lines, but I like to draw a lot of lines to make sure I'm making it nice and even here. So there's the basic shape of my head. My goal is to fill this paper as much as I can, but I'm trying to draw out my sketch or my final portrait so it matches my thumbnail sketch, because the whole point of a thumbnail sketch is to map in what you want your final project to look like. So I'm going to add in all of these features that I've done in my thumbnail sketch, and I'm also trying to fill the page. We don't want to make these very small because it's really hard to get really fine detail in cardboard if the cardboard itself is a very small detail. So once you start drawing the outside, then you can start drawing the specific detail on the inside. So we always work from general to specific. So after you generally put the shape in of the head, then you can start adding in the features. And you'll just continue doing this until the whole entire First favorite design is drawn out as a final, and then you're going to turn in your 2 smaller sketches that would be on a piece of paper like this, and then you're also going to turn in the full size 9 by 12 final portrait by the end of class.